We'd like to now hear from one of Ghana's most impressive and fastest growing companies, the KGL Group, led by Mr. Alex Dadey, to bring us greetings as a partner for the Africa Prosperity Dialogues 2026. Please put your hands together for Mr. Alex Dadey. Thank you, sir, for your partnership.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers of State. May I stand on all the protocols already observed. It is a privilege to join you at the African Prosperity Dialogues under the theme Empowering SMEs, Women, Youth in African Single Market. The African Continental Free Trade Area gives us the chance to move from fragmented ambition to a shared continental destiny. Here at the KGL Group of companies, we believe that Africa's future will be built by Africans who believe in Africa. AFCFTA is not simply about trade. It is about dignity, opportunity, and the freedom to shape our own economic narrative. This is a moment that calls for vision, a vision of an Africa where innovation is not imported, but homegrown, where African technology, African systems, and African solutions power African markets. Innovation in Africa has never been a challenge. Our people innovate out of necessity every day. The real challenge has been converting innovation into scale. Scale can only be achieved through collaboration. Collaboration across borders, across sectors, and critically between public and private sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, vision must be matched by collaboration. AFCFTA challenges us to think about borders and beyond borders, also beyond languages and beyond old rivalries. Governments, businesses, financiers, and institutions must act not as isolated actors, but as partners in the continental project. When Africa collaborates, it multiplies its strength. When it fragments, it dilutes its power. Above all, this vision must be realized through trade. Trade that is fair, inclusive, and transformative. Trade that builds factories, not dependencies. Trade that creates jobs for Africa's youth and opens doors and pathways for women and SMEs to thrive. At the KGL Group of companies, we see ourselves as part of this generational mission. We believe that good corporate citizenship and good corporate governance is anchored in good corporate governance and is critical to any successful enterprise in Africa. That is to say, wealth created through public-private partnerships should make a lasting impact in the communities we operate in. The private sector should not limit itself to PPPs to only commercial collaboration, but also be responsible corporate citizens, filling in critical social intervention gaps left uncovered by government, not as charity, but as investment in long-term stability, trust, and shared prosperity. And that brings to a very important topic that is very close to my heart. It is, if we want to attain sustainable growth, we must deliberately create African business champions that are competitive on the global stage. History shows us that lasting economic transformation is driven by great companies that can scale beyond domestic markets, businesses that meet global standards, attract international capital, and compete on quality, governance, and execution. As a leading Ghanaian and African conglomerate, the KGL Group stands firmly with this vision. An Africa that trades with itself, an Africa that invests in itself, An Africa that also invests in its people. An Africa that defines success on its own terms. An Africa built by great African global champions of enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa does not lack entrepreneurs. Africa lacks protection of successful entrepreneurs. Across this continent, whenever an African business begins to scale, whenever it moves from survival to significance, it suddenly attracts attention. Not celebration, not partnership, attention. The systematic destabilization of African business champions once they become competitive is worrying. For us at the KGL Group, this is not theory, it is lived experience. When African-owned businesses are small, they are applauded. When they grow, they are tolerated. And when they begin to dominate, they are questioned. And when they threaten entrenched interest, they are disciplined. And that's where suddenly you see regulations change in the middle of the game. That's where you see licenses are reinterpreted. That's where you see investigations multiplied. Narrative shifts from local success. They become from local successes, they become problematic dominance. This is not market competition, ladies and gentlemen. It is economic choreography. So we allow African champions to be labeled politically exposed. Indigenous success to be framed as cronyism. Wealth creation by Africans to be treated as suspicious. Meanwhile, foreign multinationals enjoy regulatory patience, narrative protection, and policy sympathy. In the modern economy, you don't destroy a company with tanks. You do so with headlines, hashtags, consultant reports of foreign agents, so-called neutral policy advisors. Once the narrative is lost on a company, the business is already wounded. And too often, Africans are recruited knowingly or unknowingly as foot soldiers in the campaign against African enterprise. These are local proxies of global agendas. Rarely is a destabilization foreign. It's usually executed through local agents with external backing, think tanks, NGOs, or consultants pushing reforms that oddly favor foreign firms. The local media and influencers who frame African success as cronyism while foreign dominance is called investment. The tragedy is Africans are sometimes used to undermine African success. And I say that from a position having worked in the developed world that I wouldn't mention the names, but we have been privy when we go out. I lived my life about 30 years outside and worked in these countries. And the economic intelligence units set up to brief us, companies based in these countries, on what goes on in these African countries, who the competitors are, which big businesses to tackle. So this is realistic. This is real economic, I would say, sovereignty fight. But still, we have, however, seen successful African businesses that began locally and grew into regional and global players. Companies like MTN Group, which expanded from a single market to a Pan-African and global telecommunication leader. One example, like we all know, is the Dangote Group, which is also done very well on the international scale. But their successes did not come from protection or isolation, but from discipline, strong institutional support, and the courage to compete internationally. Distinguished guests, building global business champions such as the KGL Group, MTN, and the lot. It's not about leaving Africa behind. It is about taking Africa with us. Local champions are not just wealthy individuals. They are economic shock absorbers. They are the anchors of supply chains, the investors in research and development, and the patient capital that foreign direct investment is not. Distinguished guests, old supply chains are breaking. New alliances are being formed. Africa's greatest advantage is not just its resources or its demographics. It is the choices we make now and the African business champions who lead this transformation. AFCFTA gives us the framework to turn these assets into enduring prosperity. Prosperity built by these great African leaders who choose cooperation over fragmentation, predictability over expediency, and long-term value over short-term comfort. And in Africa's capacity to lead, to trade, and to prosper. An Africa that invests in its people, an Africa that defines success on its own terms. The task before us is simple, but not easy. To rise together, grow together, and achieve as one people. This is our clarion call. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.